I'm just going to show you the objectives of our work package. Our work package is called Recommendations for Policies and Government Processes, which means everything, and it's not a very easy task. But what we should be doing is to try to elaborate proposals as one of the objective. Another one is to involve stakeholders, and we've been talking about this morning the necessity to create networks and to create people working together and articulating everything. We also needed to assess some structured set of government policies, which means legislation, documents, normatives, and try to develop some recommendations for future strategies, especially on a long term. We also presented STORM, but I just came up with a slide just to show you that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different countries with several also different partners. We have site managers as Meller site, we have universities as Salford, but also authorities from all the levels of administration, meteorological institutes, research centers, civil protection, firefighters, and we even have some two partners that are associated, ICROM and Pompeia site. Just to give you a picture that we could have inputs from different kind of actors and different kind of partners. So the first we had to do was to make the survey on policies and procedures, and we had to do it on a 6-month period, which was a little bit stressing at the beginning, but we ended up having a questionnaire done to 5 different countries, because we choose these countries because they have the pilot sites, as Mike showed you in this morning. And we tried also to help them engage some stakeholders in order to fulfill the questionnaires that we were sending. And those questionnaires basically were sent to ask them if they had any legislation or any normative or guidances that included cultural heritage in emergency disaster planning. And we end up with a report, a public report, that is available on our STORM blog. The analysis, besides this inquiry we made to the partners, these questionnaires that we inquired, especially decision makers at government levels and heritage site managers, we also promoted some meetings with the stakeholders, and we also made some bibliographic search especially on the internet, but also in many books that we ended up seeing, and one of them was the National Strategy for Cultural Heritage that is from here, the UK. Well, what were the results? The results and the 5 countries we surveyed, Greece, Italy, Portugal, Turkey and UK. We have to look at, these are the results, but we have to look at a little bit carefully, because when we speak in the first line of legal framework, if you have cultural heritage included in policies or in legal framework, Portugal and Turkey answered yes, but at least from our point of view, we answered that we have some measures for fire and some measures for flooding, but it's not oriented for a disaster management point of view, but for in terms of safety of a building to help people not to be injured. The same as Turkey. I think that earthquakes and fires, they have some planning and some measures, but it's not a legislation, a proper legislation developed for disaster management risks. Regarding strategies, action plans, directives or guidances, all the countries have some, and Italy is the country that has more measures and more policies developed for this kind of procedures. And they have even two directives where the first one is to include measures and the second one is to how can they cooperate with the firefighters and the civil protection. The only problem is that Italy, and our partners from Italy are not here anymore, but if they were, I would say the same, they don't agree with each other. And cultural heritage authorities and civil protection, they are continually clashing. So even though they have the documents, even though they have the cooperation agreements, they don't work. And that's something that we, in the recommendations, have to see for each country what really is in need, because some of the documents are already written, but they have to be implemented on a practice and on a daily basis. For the UK, what we listed here was the guidance for flooding. That is just a recommendation, not mandatory, but this was a 6-month period that we had to do it. So it was from 2016, and probably we can have something that Mike is going to add. Regarding emergency plans, everyone has it, and that at least is good. They have some measures worked out for an emergency plan, but many of the professionals, of the heritage professionals, enter much later on the emergency and on the disasters. So we have to work on that also, and we have to include them not only in the prevention and the preparedness phase, but previously on the emergency schemes. And procedures in place in line with the emergency plans all the countries have also. So we are ongoing, these analyses were ongoing, and we have already some results that we are planning to put on the next deliverable that is going to be handed in March. And what we came upon is that the risks are distributed across the territory in a not homogeneous way, as everyone understands. And they often varies in incidence, intensity, and impact according to local characteristics. Like Rose said, climate is very different from place to place, so we have to make a risk assessment, and each risk assessment is different in each kind of place. So we have to make some recommendations very locally based also. Policy development for risk prevention is merely undertaken at sectorial level. This means that cultural heritage sector may have some measures, the environmental sector have another measures, and they often overlap, but they don't communicate the sectors with each other. So we have to come up with an articulation scheme between all the policy sectors. Because of what? Because there's a dispersion of norms and rules that have the same objective through the different instruments that we are looking upon. And this, of course, the overlap of instruments in the territory, as I was saying, and the implementation is fragmented by different levels of governance. This means that national, regional, or local governments or authorities don't work with each other, and we have to come up with some rules for the national part, and then another ones for the regional and local, and so on. The next 2 months we are going to develop a work for all the pilot sites for all the countries. Is going to be all the legislative and non-legislative documents that we have on the first report. We are going to go back to them again and see what actions they do foresee for cultural heritage protection, not only on that specific action of their policy sector, but also in the articulation with other policy sectors. And we are going to try to see measures in the cultural heritage sector, silver protection, environmental, land planning, public works and infrastructures, or others that a different country may have. Because, for instance, Turkey doesn't have civil protection, they have a disaster management division. So we have to see if that enters on these kind of sectors that we identified. Besides that work, the survey also talked or identified some gaps and needs that we will try to see how can we recommend policy improvement. And of course, this is one of the priorities, funds, because all the countries said that they didn't have any funds specifically oriented for emergency, or if they had, it was difficult to access. So we are thinking of making recommendations for governmental budget lines to promote these kind of measures, risk assessments or prevention and mitigation measures, and to try also to allocate budget to education and raising awareness among civil society. It is very important also to think about third parties, where they can contribute, especially to cover losses of cultural assets, such as insurance companies. Many countries don't have this, and it's a very difficult subject to talk about, but it should be starting. We also need to think about recommendations on improve the access to the existing emergency funds, and why not create an international funding program for disaster risk reduction that could be useful for all the European countries. Another gap that was identified was training, and there's a necessity to continue to promote continuous training, not only to practitioners but also to involve the community and some volunteers. Promote continuous training for practitioners, including regular drills in cooperation with firefighters and civil protection, and including also regional exchange of technicians to exchange knowledge between all the staffs and all the teams to improve practices. We have seen that on the last time we've been here in a storm meeting. We went to Hampton Court, and they have a very good salvage team working on the palace, and they are just a group of 15 people that meet every week and go through the procedures every week, do a lot of drills, and even those boxes that you see on one of the smaller pictures, those are just equipments that they arrange through their small budget that they have, but they are always trying to see what kind of equipments and what kind of solutions that doesn't cost so much money they can use in order to, for instance, salvage all the paintings or salvage some of the assets they have in case of a fire or in case of a flood. And I'm trying to go very rapidly because we are late. Another need, it's education, and here we have Mike also helping us on trying to see how can we improve especially courses or contents of the syllabuses in universities or professional courses. And this slide has some of the ideas that Mike is developing to try to implement a new content of a course that could be more oriented to climate change and heritage, trying to make the students understanding the variety of impacts of climate change on cultural heritage, promote awareness of national and international approaches, guidances and legislation to climate change and heritage, and to educate on the long-term avoidance and rapid emergency reaction measures needed to protect cultural heritage from climate change. This means that at least if the students leave the university with these kind of concepts, they will be better professionals, and then they will implement at least on the management level, some of these knowledge that they get from the universities. And finally, another gap that was identified during the survey was research. What kind of research are in need to be done in the future? Of course, promote more studies on the vulnerability of the different materials in heritage sites. We have so much different types of materials and so less research on how they impact on climate change and on how they impact with the different climate. Try to do what we are doing in STORM to develop some technological solutions to monitor changes and degradations in materials based on regional climate models. This is really very important because this is the basis to have preparedness measures and to prevent instead of recover, because that's what's happening nowadays. Modeling at high spatial and temporal resolution, of course, and to try to create, and one of our partners is doing this, try to create a cost-effective methodology and to be introduced in decision-making processes, because we really need to manage very well our resources. Just to know, the picture that you are seeing, it's in Troia, and the weather station is on that picture on the bottom of your right side, and on the top there's some partner of ours that is doing some measures to see the biological infestation of the paintings, and he's developing that research. So that's all. And last but not least, that's what we've been talking about for a long time. We have to translate the scientific knowledge into policies. We have to see what the researchers are doing, try to ask them for their help, cooperate, and then to see how can we introduce in the management sector for a better protection of cultural heritage. So that's it. Thank you.
Rose talked about the climate, the weathers, and how she'd measure things. And Robert talked about the weather stations and that. Mm-hmm. But I noticed for Portugal, on their list, they'd put bombs. So are you all looking at political climates as well?
On the projects, we focused on the natural hazards, although we also have anthropogenic hazards. We included at the time because it was in the first period, so we're not at the beginning. We were at the beginning of the project, and we were not sure if we were going to include all the anthropogenic hazards. In the risk assessment, we listed all the hazards, whether it was natural or anthropogenic. So we let it be there, but we are focused more on natural hazards. Although some other projects are developing that, especially because of the menaces that we are having with the terrorists and all sort of things.